I'm just fascinated by Tito's chicken and pizza. Yeah, I like
So that's just a couple of the influences of the Beatles. Buddy Holly, I wouldn't say he was more important than Elvis Presley, but very important. So we're heading towards Ringo's house. That's the first house we're going to see today. Ringo was from the most working class area of the four Beatles. He had pleurisy and he had peritonitis as a child. Nearly died of one of those illnesses. Spent about a year recuperating in hospital, and his way out was through rock and roll. He lived in what they call in England a 2 up, 2 down. That's 2 rooms upstairs, 2 rooms downstairs, no indoor toilet, no bathroom, and no central heating up until the mid 1960s. The toilet was in the backyard. When you went to the toilet in the winter, you took a hammer with you so you could smash the ice that had formed inside the toilet bowl.
Oh my gosh.
Somebody once said to me that if you had a hammer to smash the ice, then you were posh. The other neighbours would be like, ooh, look at them, they've got a hammer and everything. So this is where Ringo grew up. 5 years in one of the houses, then he moved just across the road. You can see a lovely mural on your right there of Ringo, just coming up. And the next street coming up on your left as well, not Rualis, but Powys, is where they filmed Peaky Blinders. So you can just see it on your left. Yeah. So that's where they filmed Peaky's there. We're not going to get out here, but I'll just talk for a moment. So that was the Peaky Blinders house behind us. Then we're going to go slowly past this next street, and if you look down on the left, that was the street where Ringo was born, lived for the first 5 years of his life. And then you can see the mural over there on your right. As we go past there, that's the other street where he moved to when he was 5 years old. When he became famous here, there was a backyard where you'd go out and go to the toilet. The wall wasn't very high, so when he was famous, all the girls used to come and sit on the back wall. So he was too embarrassed to go to the toilet. So his mum used to run out with a broom and push them all off the back wall, and then he would come running out to use the toilet. He's now worth about £250 million. His official residence is Monte Carlo, so he doesn't have to pay taxes. And I imagine he has an indoor toilet. He also has a place in London. I know he has a couple of places in America. Yeah, he's probably the least wealthy of the four Beatles or their estates, and he's worth about £250 million. So not bad for drumming, really.
Still doing okay, huh?
Okay, so we will go slowly past the street on the left, and that's where he was born. Okay. Number 5 Madryn Street.
So this is the...
That was Ringo's street. And then on your right here you'll see the lovely mural, and that's the street where he moved to when he was 5 years old, when his parents separated.
Yeah. All right, we're going to be seeing a very famous sign here. Wonder where we are. Oh, look at that. Penny Lane.
Okay, just be careful, we've got a car coming. So when McCartney's writing this, in his mind's eye it's about 1957, and he describes a very suburban. He describes a very suburban and typical landscape, really. He talks about the banker on the corner having a motor car, and he would have mentioned that because only one family in 7 had a car in 1957. So that's in his mind's eye, the date. My uncle lived around here, and he was about the same age as McCartney, and he remembers that the brow of this hill that we're going over was cobbled, and cows used to come over here in the morning and they would slip on the cobbles. So you're imagining something a little more countryside than it is now. The beauty of Lennon and McCartney is they knew what a great song was, and they knew what a great song title was as well. If you buy a single that's called Penny Lane and flip it over and the other side is called Strawberry Fields, you like them before you've heard them. It's not like it's Mud Street and Potato Fields. It's Penny Lane and it's Strawberry Fields. I mean, what's not to like? So we're going to come to the end of of Penny Lane in a moment, which is where the bus shelter is, and where the bank is, and where the barber shop is as well. As I say, it is a pretty typical suburban street. The bank is gone, or the original bank is gone, and the shelter in the middle of the roundabout is no longer a bus shelter, but it used to be where Paul would come past on the top deck of a double-decker bus. He also revisits it in A Day in the Life with that woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. So that's him running late for school and being a schoolboy, getting on top of the double-decker bus and looking down. So in a moment we're going to go across these lights. You can see the bus shelter in the middle of the roundabout. It's now called Sergeant Pepper's Bistro, but that was the original bus shelter. When we turn round to the right, you'll see Tony Slavin, which was the original barbershop. It is the original barbershop, although back in the day it was called Bioletti's, so it was an Italian owner at that time. And this, my friends, is Penny Lane. You know, it's that simple. I have lived around here for quite a large portion of my life, and I would never have thought of writing a song about this. But, you know, really, I imagine it like a painting. It's like when you see an impressionist painting and you think, well, I would never have seen it like that. Paul McCartney takes something suburban and he sprinkles magic dust right over it, and it turns it into a special song. So in a moment I'll play the song, and just before that, when these lights change, then I'll be able to show you the barbershop on the left. So as we turn right here, that was the bank, now the surgery, and you can just see the barbershop on your left hand side there. That's Penny Lane Barbershop.
Tony Slavin.
And this is the Penny Lane Triangle. So let me look for the song.
That's the roundabout. That's the
shelter in the middle of the roundabout.
Yeah. And it's now called Sergeant Pepper's Bistro. So these...
We've got another coach, so when we can, we'll...
This is all that's left of Strawberry Fields. It used to be an orphanage,
took a few.
So it used to be an orphanage, and this is it. So the old orphanage has been completely knocked down and destroyed, but they kept the gates to it. And here's where it all happened. Got a sign here. Welcome to Strawberry Fields. So a little something we just learned about Strawberry Fields is when John's aunt found out that he was sneaking onto the orphanage to play, they said, if they catch little children playing there, they hang them. And that's where the line in Strawberry Fields came from.
Nothing to get hung about.
Nothing.
So when John was 5 years here, what happened when he was 5 is his mother Julia and his father Freddie separated, and his father disappeared and went to sea, never to be seen again until he was a multi-millionaire, or until his son was a multi-millionaire, and then he, surprise, turned up again. His mum formed another relationship, but she was still married to Freddie because Freddie had gone to sea and she didn't know where he'd gone to. So it was decided within the family that John would come and live with his auntie Mimi. His auntie was happily married to George, and she was very strict. She loved John a lot, but she always used to say to him, "The guitar's okay, John, but you're never going to make a living playing the guitar." So in 1965, when he bought her a house, he put a plaque up in the house that he'd bought her that read, "The guitar's okay, John, but you're never going to make a living playing the guitar." We don't get out at this house, but you get a great view from the coach, and we are going to stop long enough for those on the right hand side to stand up and take a photograph of the house on your left.
Or left.
Right.
Ah, right here.
So that's John's house there with the blue plaque on it. It's semi-detached. We do stop here, so if you do want to stand up and get a photograph from this side, you can. His bedroom was the little room there. He spent 18 years of his life in this house, so almost half of his life, sadly, because he only lived till he was 40. So an incredibly important house. That's where he would have picked up his first guitar, where he would have listened to Elvis for the first time. He had a poster of Brigitte Bardot up on the wall there, so there were other things on his mind than music. 18 years. This is where he came back to after he'd been in Hamburg to live with his auntie Mimi. It's also where he lived for a time with Cynthia, because they had nowhere else to live, with their firstborn, with Julian. When they sold the house in 1965, the couple that bought it sold it again a couple of months later and didn't tell the next couple that this was John Lennon's house. So they moved in, opened the curtains one morning, and there were 5 Canadians in their garden taking photographs. I just made that up about the Canadians. I don't think they were Canadian. But anyway, that was when they realised they lived in John Lennon's house. They didn't like the Beatles. They spent 36 years chasing people out of their garden. But the interesting thing for me about that story is the guy who lived there was my uncle. So I was one of the few people that got into that house. There's no number on the gate. It should be 251 Menlove Avenue, and there's no number on the gate because I own it. That's the number to John Lennon's house.
Ah,
I bet Gary doesn't have this. So, sorry? That is a true story, yeah. My Uncle Ernie My uncle bought it, yeah. And then I used to visit, and he was making changes. He said, "Do you want this old number?" Because he didn't like the Beatles. I was like, "Yeah, all right."
Best souvenir ever.
He gave me the number. I wish.
So we're just taking a short little walk over here, and we're gonna stop by Paul McCartney's house. He moved here at the age of 14. And then when they moved here, his mother passed away shortly afterwards of breast cancer. And his mother's name was Mary. So in the song Let It Be, when he starts talking about, and Mother Mary comes to me, many people think that he's talking about the Virgin Mary, but it's actually, he's talking about his mom. Across the street over here. And it's right here. This is the proud home of the McCartney family, Jim, Mary, Paul, and Mike. So this is it. So, yes, there what it was. Paul McCartney's house. Growing up from the age of 14 until they became famous. Or he became famous and with the Beatles. But when you hear the song, got up, get out of bed, run the comb across my head, that's all about him running late for school. So he would go from there and he would run down this street over to the bus stop. And I crossed the street, but apparently our bus moved to that side, so I gotta go back across the street again. It's actually a very lovely neighborhood. I noticed the house directly next door had sold. How would you like to buy the house that was next door to where Paul McCartney grew up?
You would absolutely buy that house.
I would totally buy that house just to say, hey.
You would sit in the front lawn and tell people stories about Paul McCartney.
That's right. About how I knew him well.
Yes, you didn't know him at all.
Oh, really?
I knew him when.
They're like, aren't you like quite a bit younger than him?
No, I just aged better, that's all. So yes, I didn't film it as we got on the bus, but there's the bus stop right there that he was running late from. Running late to. He had to run a brush across his hair. And
McCartney's house was a council house, and he moved there when he was 14. It doesn't have a blue plaque on it, because to get a blue plaque you have to be dead, and you have to be dead for 20 years, and then they give you a blue plaque. Happily, Paul McCartney is not dead, so he does not have a blue plaque.
that's not what the album says.
His mother died when he was 14, so it meant that his father went to work. His father worked as a cotton broker. He was a non-professional jazz musician, so there were always lots of instruments in the house. Perfect for somebody like Paul McCartney, who was a great musician. It also meant that his father, while his father was at work, he and John would take the day off school and write songs in that house. They used to smoke his dad's pipe with tea leaves in the pipe mixed with tobacco, so his father wouldn't notice how much tobacco they were stealing off him. One of the first songs they wrote in that house was I Saw Her Standing There, and Paul McCartney had written quite a lot of the song, and he'd written She Was Just 17, a real beauty queen, and John Lennon said, no, I think we can come up with a better lyric than that. And Paul said, okay, well, you come up with something. And he wrote, She Was Just 17, you know what I mean, which is a better lyric. So I'm going to play you a little bit of I Saw Her Standing There.
We just passed
the Beatles,
Britannia Inn.
They split up somewhat acrimoniously. Most of them blame Paul for the split up of the Beatles, and then everyone else seemed to blame Yoko. But anyway, they split up. There's a song by the Beatles on Sgt. Pepper called Getting Better, and Paul McCartney was writing that song. He was at the piano singing, it's getting better all the time, and John Lennon came up with, it can't get no worse. And that really kind of summed up the difference between the two Beatles and the power of the two Beatles, because John Lennon had the knack of bringing down Paul McCartney's eternal optimism, and Paul McCartney had the knack of bringing up John Lennon's tendency for pessimism, and a beautiful balance was reached between the two. Left to their own devices, McCartney could sometimes move towards the twee, and Lennon could move towards some quite dark and artistic, let us say, material. You could have seen the Beatles for about 15 pence in an audience of about 500. It was always very basic. It was actually just the basement of an old fruit and vegetable warehouse. The toilets used to flood when the tide was in. And women used to go in with their hair straight and come out with it curly because of the humidity. So pretty basic, no fire escape. I did a tour, this is just the thing about wings, that I did a tour for a guy that was obviously like a teenager in the 70s, and he was massively into wings, and one of his friends picked up an album and said, you know, this guy was in a band before. And he didn't.
No way.
He said, really? He goes, yeah, the Beatles, check them out. So within a few years he was in Liverpool, mad about the Beatles, you know. But what a lovely thing to just kind of be into wings and then someone say, and realise you have a whole Beatles back catalogue to get into.
Slug and lettuce together since 1985.
Okay. So yeah, okay, fine.
OMG.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay, so those that want to come and have a quick look at the Cavern, follow me.
So here we are downtown in the city part, and we are going to walk down to see the Cavern. Here is Temple Court. Karaoke every day.
Every day.
There's another Beatles museum over here.
The unique and authentic.
Pete, Ringo, John, Paul, Stuart, George. There's a Beatles bar called the Rubber Soul next to King John. Sir George Martin, record producer of the Beatles. I'm sorry? There's another Vivian Westwood sign. Flares. Here's the Cavern Club. Here it is. Excuse me. And there it is, the famous Cavern Club. How about that? Right next to the famous Cavern Club is Sgt. Pepper's. Then across the street they have the sister pub to the Cavern Club opposite the Cavern Pub. Look at the Zombies. Great band. Adele. Cheap Trick. Okay. And who did you want? Who were you pointing out?
Mickey Dolenz. Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, look at that. Mickey Dolenz. Jimi Hendrix. Jack Dupree. Chuck Berry. The Kinks. Nice. On the corner, they've got a whole bunch of Beatles stuff. It is the Lonely Hearts Club Band store. Oh, they got Mr. Bean. It's the Harrison's apartment hotel. Okay. Oh.
Nope, it says don't walk.
I guess we'll wait. I like their stop and walk signs here.
It doesn't say walk.
Ah, she made it. So we're just waiting for the man to turn green here. And then we'll go.
Okay.
I think we're safe. Okay, there we go. Now we have a green man.
So that was the Cavern. And as I say, the Beatles played there 272 times. Nowadays, lots of tourist shops selling Beatles things, and there's also a Beatles themed hotel called A Hard Day's Night. Now, a few years ago I did a tour. I did a private tour. It was just for a couple, and the guy was from New Jersey, and he was emailing me saying, I want to do this Beatles tour. It's going to be all day, and during the tour I'm going to ask my girlfriend to marry me.
Look at all the pigeons.
So I thought, no pressure. I had to organise this, and what happened is we went for afternoon tea in the Hard Day's Night Hotel, and I organised it. And when they went in, it was quite busy. And what she didn't know is that everyone in the cafe at that time was a choir that I had organised, like a flash mob, really. And so, just in the middle of afternoon tea, he got down on one knee, and all the people in the restaurant stood up and started singing "And I Love Her" by the Beatles.
And she said no.
It was a beautiful moment. Unfortunately, she said no.
Oh.
I hope you know that I'm kidding. Honestly, if she'd have said no, one of the receptionists would have married him, because there wasn't a dry eye in the house. It also leads me quite nicely. Somebody asked me what, one of my favourite Beatles songs is. And really, that for me, it's like asking, which is my favourite child. My son. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, but it does lead me on. Definitely one of my favourites is "And I Love Her." I'm going to play that in a minute. Not just because it has that lovely association of somebody getting married, but also, we talked about George, and George is often underrated as a songwriter, but it's also what he gave to all the other Beatles songs. And this is a beautiful example, because that wonderful Spanish guitar do 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 is what picks that song up, so let me play a little bit of that.
So this is where we are docked for Liverpool, and I just wanted to show you it because this is the Mersey, and look what's going right across it right there. A ferry. That's right, that is the ferry across the Mersey. So if you ever hear that song, ferry cross the Mersey, and this is it, that's the ferry across the Mersey. So before we depart and set sail once again, I just wanted to give you one more shot of this small section of Liverpool, which I'm telling you folks, I am in heaven right now for the things that I saw today. All the Beatles stuff, this was just absolutely fantastic. Love Liverpool. Everybody was wonderful. So far, everybody that you even come across in all these different towns are so nice, so friendly, so helpful. So just had a great time. This has been a fantastic trip so far. So, but I highly recommend Liverpool if you have the means.